The lesson today talks about socialization and life cycle. As we all know, socialization is the process where people learn and shape their personalities. Socialization begins at birth and it continues through the life cycle. What is a life cycle? It's a group of stages that people pass through. It's between birth and death. So it's a series of stages that all people pass through. What are the stages of the life cycle? You start with a child, you grow up into an adolescent, you become an adult, and then finally you become an old person. This is a process rather than a stage, death and dying. The first part is childhood. Now, during the Renaissance time, children were considered as mini adults. They did not play, they did not have fun. They were often pictured in adult clothing. During the industrialization age, young children worked, but today they're viewed as dependent creatures. They're weak creatures who need guidance, who need their parents to take care of them, protect them, and give them schooling. According to laws, children under the age of 16 are not supposed to work. Any questions on childhood?
تمام مس تمام.
تمام.
The second stage is adolescence. Adolescence is the stage between childhood and adulthood. You're not a child anymore, and you're not considered as an adult. Moreover, you are a teenager. Now, in this stage, usually we face physiological and psychological changes. Physiological changes are the changes that happen to the body. They're known as puberty, change in height, weight, and other body features. The psychological changes are changes in the brain, not in the physical features. Some examples of the psychological changes or challenges is that adolescents, they face the problem of undefined status. They're not children, they're not adults. Your parents can treat you as a grown-up one day and as an adult one day and independent. And on the other day, they will treat you as a child and they will say that you don't know how to make choices or decisions. So you usually face the problem of undefined status. You don't know where do you stand. The second problem will be increased decision making. You are expected to be a good student, a responsible student. You should have responsible behavior. You need to study hard. You need to get good scores on your SAT. You need to apply for your college. You need to have a good relationship with your friends. So it's all decision making that depends on you personally, not anyone else. So this is increased pressure on you. And because you have to decide on increased decision making, you face the problem of feeling of pressure. So because you have to do a lot. ايه لوجي؟
بس منى الأذان بتحاول تدخل.
Okay, give me a second. She's in. So as we said, the second problem you face is increased decision making. You have to do a lot of decisions. And because you face a lot of decisions to make, you face the increased feeling of pressure. Any questions so far on psychological problems or challenges?
تمام.
تمام.
Now, some psychologists and sociologists, they say that social classes, they affect adolescents. In some classes, in the working class, the adolescents are either forced to continue education. They need to continue education to become better than their parents, to live a better life than their parents, or they're forced to drop the education to help their parents work and earn money for their living. So the social class affects the adolescents. Any questions?
No.
The third stage is adulthood. Now, Adulthood is divided into two substages. Early adulthood, from 18 to 19, late teenage years until the late 20s, and the middle years, from the 30s until 65. Now, in the early adulthood or in the transitional adulthood, the one from your teenage years until your late 20s, you live apart from your parents, but you're not yet financially independent. You obtain a college degree, and sometimes you return back to live with your parents. Now, transitional adults, they face two challenges. They need to find a full-time job, and there's also the decision making of marriage. Should they get married or not? Now, in most of the societies, marriage is considered as a traditional rite of passage. It means it's considered that you're officially an adult when you get married and you hold that responsibility. In some societies, not all of them. Now, during this time from 18 to 29, adults face a situation. Either they become successful in their choices, in their college, they find work, they get married, and they get intimacy skills, and they move on as successful adults, or they do not succeed in one of the factors, whether it's college, whether it's work, whether it's marriage, and they become isolated. So in this stage, the transitional adulthood, you have the intimacy versus isolation dilemma, which means that you're in a situation where it's a crossroad. Either you succeed or you don't. If you succeed, you continue with a happy life. If you do not succeed, you're partially isolated from people because you're depressed. Any questions about the transitional adulthood from 18 to 29?
No.
Okay. Now the second part of adulthood, from when you're 30 up to 65. This is more settled, okay? You become more confident of your life goals. You now have a family and a secure job, and they're usually achieved. From 50 to 64, they say that a stage called reorientation or a process called reorientation occurs. Adults start to shift their attention from how far they've come to how much they still have left. And you're 50 years old, you achieved most of the things that most human beings accomplish, whether it's college, work, kids, marriage, and you start looking on how much time do you still have left on earth before you die. So how are you going to use this time left? Now, finally, the old ages from 65 to 70. What happens is that you get a feeling of that time is closing in, you're getting old. Most of the people by this age are retired, they do not work, and as a result of retirement, your brain cells do not function properly, so you start losing parts of your brain cells. You do not remember some things, you do not uh, do the easy math uh, things that you do, addition, subtraction, you do not recall situations, you start to forget because your brain cells are not working properly. Finally, the last stage in the life cycle is death. Now, death is a process rather than a stage, and the stages were done based on research. And not all people will pass through these stages. Now, the sociologists, they say that there are 5 stages of death. This is done based upon research. Not everyone has to pass through the 5 stages, and they did this based on people with terminal illness, who are people with cancer, people with uh, AIDS, people who have diseases that eventually will cause them to die. The first stage of death is denial. When a person is being told that he has a terminal illness and this illness is going to cause him death, the person goes in denial. They cannot believe that they're going to die, and they start questioning whether the information that was told is true or not. Is it valid or not? Stage 2, anger. The denial turns into anger. They're angry because they're going to die, and why wouldn't anyone else die? And they think it's unjust or unfair. They're usually hostile and irritable during this time. Stage 3, it's bargaining. They're not ready to accept death yet, so they start debating. Debating means that they start to fight for extra time. This can be by undergoing painful treatments or surgeries. So they start to try to do anything or take anything to extend their time. Finally, or before finally, 4, it's depression. Okay, now reality sets. They know that there is no escape and they will eventually die because of the illness. The person realizes he won't escape death, so they sit alone thinking about the ones they will leave behind and what are they going to do without them. Finally, the last stage is acceptance. Depression goes away, they thought and they got upset and angry, and all of these feelings went away, and what is left is one final feeling, which is acceptance. The person reaches the stage of accepting what's happening. They put their affairs in order, means that if they have a certain business, if they have a certain uh, task or accomplishment, they finish everything that needs to be done with their family members and they start saying goodbye and they're ready to die. Now, not everyone is going to pass through these 5 stages. Some people skip a stage or 2, some people skip from stage 1 to stage 5. But most of the people pass through these 5 stages. Do you understand? Any questions on 5 stages?
تمام miss.
Okay. Now, the last thing is because of these 5 steps of death, there's a new movement called the hospital movement. It's kind of a care, hospitalized care, where they bring all of the hospital equipments into the house. They provide the psychological and the physiological help to the patient so that they keep the patient in his house. They allow him to stay home in his room surrounded by family members until the moment of death, because some people hate the idea or reject the idea of dying at hospitals. So this movement allows to bring the hospital to the houses. Any questions?
تمام miss. تمام.
ماشي. This was the end of our lesson. It's an easy one, only about the 5 steps. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Bye bye.
باي.
Bye.